Okay, welcome back to Bounce Around Charleston. Mr. Bill Saunders and Reverend Thomas Nesbitt Jr. Okay, we've discussed the march itself. If Dr. King was here today, what would he say about the world and what has happened since the march? Mr. Saunders?
Well, I would think that, we have drifted so far back, but going back to the march and what happened after the march, South Carolina, for instance, wasn't paying minimum wage to its workers in 1963. That was before the kids got killed at Orangeburg, before the hospital strike. And the state wasn't paying minimum wage. So all of that stuff happened. And he just mentioned Reverend Grady, who chaired the committee that solved the hospital strike. So there's a connection all the way through to where we are today. I think
the hospital strike and the city workers strike.
All of that was a part of the same thing, and it came out of that march on Washington. People began to be willing to put their lives on the line, because this was serious business. And if you wasn't willing to put your life on the line, you couldn't do a lot of things. But we had so many willing people in Charleston that did this, between the religious community and some other folk. We had the folk from the west side of Charleston called the Jackson Street Panthers.
I remember that name. I remember
they were a part of the hospital workers that worked for me during that time to help solve that strike. So Reverend Nesbitt could talk more about, but that it's a lot of exciting thing happened during that time.
Okay, being a 17-year-old young man from that time to now, what did you have to say?
I'm a little disappointed. I'm disappointed in the fact that we have made some wonderful and great strides. We as a people have done some absolutely magnificent things, but we at the same time have not lived up to our ability and our capability to do the right thing. And now this is not entirely our fault. There are some outside pressures, there are some outside situations. I think Dr. King would have a bittersweet reaction to today's situation in this world. Sweet because his dream has been realized to a great extent, with the first black president having been elected and re-elected. But at the same time, there is so much grassroots work to be done. Black boys are still killing black boys. White men are still killing black boys. So I don't want to get too far off the beaten path here, but we have come a long way. We've done a lot of good things. We've still got a long way to go.
So when they get to Washington this weekend to commemorate and celebrate the 50 years, what should they expect?
Well, I think they need to have an agenda of their own on what they need to do. What the Reverend just talked about, and he was very polite with it in terms of what was going wrong with it. But when Ronald Reagan got elected president, so many of the gains that we made began to shift and going back. And we're going to have to begin to now address those things, because we are blaming ourselves. We elected a black president. So a lot of our enemies now, the Klans and everybody, so y'all don't need no more rights anymore. No voters' rights. You don't need any of those things because you got a black president.
We just had a talk show on here a couple of weeks ago that talked about the movement of the black church and how during that period, in that era, everything happened at the black church.
Everything.
All of your meetings, all of your information. But now we have not been doing our job.
At our church on Johns Island, when we had a meeting, there would be cops around the church back in the 60s. But right now you can have any meeting at the church. You don't have to worry about any cops, because we're not doing anything like we did back in that time.
We're going to bring you two gentlemen back to bounce around, because we need to talk some more about this. But I'm quite sure as we end this segment of remembering and celebrating the March on Washington, one thing Dr. King would end and always say: free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last. Now, coming up next, music by Charlton Singleton and the Quintet.